Welcome. I'm Vance P. Ross, Director of Annual Conference Relationships at Discipleship Ministries and the moderator for this conversation. I'm excited to be with two international church leaders. Both are successful new church planters. Both are passionate about creating disciples of Jesus. And even though they are from different cultures, half a world apart, they understand how awakening a movement capable of changing society begins with winning disciples for Jesus Christ. Welcome, Reverend Junius Dotson, General Secretary of Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church, and welcome Bishop Gary Rivas, Bishop of the Central District, primarily the Johannesburg area of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. Thank you in advance for sharing your experiences and your vision. Let's get into some conversation.
Thank you.
I imagine, because both of you are successful church planners, you know from experience that you must create disciples in order to build a church. Let's start there. Gary, how do you make disciples who live a spiritually productive life?
I think that if I can for a moment go, it's all about, from a pastoral perspective, our training. For us to go, it doesn't come naturally. We think that getting involved in the planting of a church or a church growth, you would think that discipling people is natural, because we read about it in the Gospels all the time, the disciples of Jesus. We speak about disciples. Mm-hmm. We read the scriptures, most Sundays, and if we're speaking about the disciples of Jesus Christ, but yet it's such a foreign concept in a way, and maybe it's because of the context that we find ourselves in, depending where we are in the world. But the training of our clergy and laity and volunteers to understand the concept of discipleship and the interpretation of what a true disciple is. And my understanding of it is the word disciple, has origins around the word of discipline. Mm-hmm. And you have to be disciplined and intentional about discipling, and discipling for me is built on relationship. Even if I can push it towards a disciplined covenantal relationship that involves more than one person, which ultimately leads to community and a whole lot of other things. So for me, it's around that.
Okay, being disciplined. Relationships, that implies more than one person. Junius, let me turn to you. What does a relationship building, disciple making system look like? I'm assuming that because you talked about relationships, Gary, that means this happens with more than one person. What then would a system that look like?
Well, I think for a local church, when we talk about intentional discipleship, really a system, a good, effective system, looks like creating opportunities, first and foremost for people, to ensure that people are comfortable in their understanding of who they are and whose they are in Christ Jesus. That's the knowing Christ. That a good system will do some intentional teaching around spiritual disciplines, whatever those spiritual disciplines are normative for that particular congregation in their context. I would think some of those would be daily devotional, being a part of a small group, like teaching people the value of being part of a small group, prayer, and specifically, I think an effective system would teach people the how-to of prayer. There's a lot of you ought to pray, but how do people, teaching people how to pray is an important piece. What are some models for effective prayer? What are some tools to journal your prayers? What are some tools to be in conversation with God on a regular basis? I think that effective system would do that. Another, I think, normative discipline would be tithing, helping people understand the value of giving from a stewardship perspective, but also from a perspective of, if I'm knowing Christ and I'm growing in Christ, I want to be able to support, ministry and mission, and I say the message of the house, right? How this message continues to extend, beyond the four walls of a local congregation. Fasting. Well, that's another discipline that can be normative in a particular ministry context. So That's an important piece. I think a third aspect of that is how you help people identify their spiritual gifts and how they are uniquely gifted to release those gifts for the building of the body of Christ. That's an important piece of that. And then lastly, I would think about how people share their faith stories. Right? How do you share your faith? And what are opportunities to share your faith? And to do it in a way where people aren't intimidated by that, but do it in a way that there are so many natural opportunities, for you to be able to share your faith with others. And so I think a matter of giving persons the tools to do that, but also giving them the freedom to do that as well. So I think those would be some key elements of an effective system. And of course, that presupposes or assumes worship, and obviously worship is as the centerpiece of that, right? All roads lead to worship. Ultimately, disciples are worshipers of Christ, and so that would be a key part of an effective system.
Yeah. You talked about relationships. You talked about small groups, releasing people into call and gift, training, as Gary talked about. Junius, I want to continue along that line somewhat within the Methodist Church, but especially within the United Methodist Church. We've heard a whole lot about the nones and dones. People who claim no religious preference, who claim the church is irrelevant. You just talked about being able to share in a way that's not intimidating, but brings people on board.
Right.
So Junius, how do disciples in a local church build meaningful relationships with nones and dones that reach more people, that reach younger people, and reach diverse people?
Well, I think the starting point of this is it's really about building relationships. Okay, we have an initiative in our house, Discipleship Ministries, called See All the People, and the genesis of See All the People is, number one, moving beyond the four walls of the church. Secondly, seeing the persons who really are in our midst, people who are in our community. And then thirdly, it's about, those building of relationships. And building of relationships should be, they have to be authentic, not transactional. Like I authentically want to get to know who you are, as an individual. I want to hear your story.
You don't want to necessarily get something out of it.
Absolutely. Exactly. So, and that's a huge difference, right? So if I'm connecting with someone, I'm not expecting anything out of in return from you. I'm not just connecting with you because I want to invite you to church. Well, I'm connecting with you because I am authentically interested in who you are as a human being. So that's important. The relationships that are organic, right? In other words, you don't really know where these relationships are going, right? And so just being open to the move of the Spirit, how God is going to move in that type of interaction. And then the third piece, I think, is consistency. So I think our churches have to be consistent with building those relationships with our neighbors. And so, if a person, I had persons, when I was pastoring a local church, I had persons who were our neighbors. Some folk live right across the street. Some folk live right next door. And they didn't go to my church, but I still consistently would go knock on the door. Hey, I just want to check on you. You doing all right? Because those are our neighbors, right? And I think that's really the genesis of building, effective relationships that, provide us opportunities to get to know people, and opportunities to eventually hopefully be able to just to share your story with somebody.
Yeah, and Vance, the thing is that we have to clear up some misconceptions though, because coming from a clergy or from a pastoral perspective, most of the people, whether we like it or not, that pastors or clergy hang out with are other clergy or other pastors, and we work within a context that is sort of a saved context in a sense, Our congregation members, and we're coming from the approach of a pastor doing evangelism or building relationships, our congregation members are meeting with people every single day in a much more real and active environment and ripe environment for evangelism. But we can't approach it from through a pastoral or clergy perspective. So for example, let me give you an example, church unity, okay? So the pastors, okay, we need to speak about church unity. Our congregation members have got church unity. They understand it. They're sitting down with Presbyterians and Anglicans and Independents every single day of their lives. They're working. We don't. We're hanging around with United Methodist Church or that, in a sense, that more so. Our congregation members get the deal of working across the desk from a Muslim or from a Presbyterian or whatever. So they understand this thing, and they're in the context. They're in the trenches, in a sense. So we have to give them tools, not from our perspective, for example, on church unity, or not from our perspective on evangelism, which is often to get them into our churches. That's not evangelism. That's not evangelism. Is building relationship, authentic, all of that stuff, so that people will be drawn to the light and love and grace of Jesus Christ, not necessarily with a motive to get them into my local church. So, and they have the reality of working in an environment that is ripe for evangelism. So the tools that we give them, our congregation members, we need to have a lot more involvement from perspective, because in some ways we've lost touch of what it is to be, for example, in an office environment or a construction environment where there are a whole lot of people that are. So I agree 100% with what you said, but I'm just saying, I think that the angle and the way we look at evangelism and even discipleship comes way too much from a pastoral clergy perspective and not enough from a lay perspective.
Let me push that a little bit, because as you talked about this not being transactional, Gary, you lit up. You both looked at each other, talked about authenticity. That assumes not technical, not transactional, but I'm assuming from you, transformational.
Yes.
It is transformational, and I think, going back to what Gary just said, I use a term, this is the term I like to use, teaching folk how to strategically, hang out. And what that simply means is that when you're in relationship with people, there are natural moments in people's lives when they are more receptive to hearing the gospel story, or they're going to be more apt to ask you certain questions. For instance, in moments of death, or bereavement, or in moments of life transitions, weddings, graduations. These just become natural opportunities for people want to know, how you make it through certain stages of life. People want to know, how do you get over somebody losing a loved one? Those become natural opportunities to share your faith. And it's in those moments when believers, Christians, followers of Christ can't be afraid to say, well, this is what I have found helpful in my life during a time of death. This is what I have found helpful in my life in major life transitions. Those are moments where we just have to we have to teach people that there are going to be natural moments in life when in your relationship with people where they want to know the answers to these questions.
So what you're saying, let me just follow this up, and then you can jump right in. What you seem to be suggesting then is that living your life in Jesus Christ in natural places brings a supernatural authenticity forward. That can grab somebody. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Correct. If I can jump in, and you're 100% right, because I'm saying, for example, I say to people, if someone in your office, a colleague in your office's parent passed away or something, were the Christians the most active in making meals, in caring, in visiting, and without any, you can just step into that moment. But not only in that, is that I want to be able to, in the midst of an economic crisis or in the midst of anything, that when I look around and I look across at you and I see, without you preaching to me, without you saying anything religious to me or faith-based, that I simply look at you and go, there's something about this person that makes them different. I want what they've got. Without even saying a word. There's this thing that we talk about, the peace that passes all understanding. Then in the midst of the storm of your life, in the midst of criticism, in the midst of everything going down, in the midst of negativity, why is it that you get to be so calm? And it opens up a conversation without you even saying a word. That's the one thing. The other thing is, I know a person that came to Christ, and when I spoke to them about the conversion experience, they said to me, in my office context, the general principle was that people would always bring other people's faults into the light of day for discussion. you know, there was criticism or, and there was one person in our office that when everyone else gossiped or when everyone else tried to bring someone's fault into the light of day so everyone could be part of that person's shortcomings, this one person refused to be part of it. And after a while I went to them and I said to them, like, you know, why is it that you seem to stay away from, you know, the negativity or the gossip or the bringing, as they said, bringing a person's fault into the light of day, and then this person simply spoke about people's humanity and spoke about, and I'm like, and so then they started saying, well, I wanted to know what it is the root cause of you not wanting to be part of this negative spiral of bringing other people's faults into the light of day. And I found out at the end of the day it was because of their faith. Sure. And I wanted some of that. And I wanted to know the God of that person. Sure. And they introduced me to Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Goodness.
It was amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And particularly amazing as I listen to you, Gary. You come from a part of the world, a continent, Africa, where it appears, we hear that this faith is growing exponentially.
Yeah.
How is it that moments like what you just described have helped to move what's happening in Africa, South Africa particularly, from being simply moments to what you call around us, Junius, a movement? Mm-hmm. Seems to be a movement. You follow me?
Yeah.
How have you all been able to build and develop a faith, a Christianity that seems to be exploding?
Yeah. You know, someone said that if you want Christianity to grow, there are two ingredients. Number one, it needs to be persecuted, and number two, you shouldn't have church buildings. So the minute and so I'm from a church plant, and I can tell you now from when we went from operating in school halls until we were able to raise funds to build, and our evangelical fervor and our growth and everything was up and to the right for 7 years. The minute we moved into a building, after sort of 7 or 8 years, that fervor in a way, buildings. Everyone wants a church building, but let me tell you, it's not the, you know. So if you take if you take countries where Christianity is growing exponentially, the church is persecuted and they don't have any buildings. You know, so if you play, for example, take China or whatever. So, but the common ingredient though is this thing of getting into a place of comfort. So the church in Africa has never been plentiful in terms of resources and buildings. So the thing that has kept us growing is the fact that we've never been able to get into a comfortable space. So the needs of our communities across Africa have been huge. Diseases have been huge. We have never ever been able to get into a comfort zone. We have never ever been able to get into a rut, ever, because of the challenges we face as a people in Africa. So whether it be through the earlier colonization of the continent, whether it be through the division of how Africa was divided up, whether it be through slavery, whether it be through colonialism, whether it be whatever the case may be, we have never ever been able to go, this is really comfortable church now, you know, because we've had ravaged by wars and diseases and despots and colonial and all the stuff that's affected us. And in the midst of that struggle, the church's mission has always been beyond the walls, always been beyond the walls. And so we've never had an opportunity to sit back and get comfortable. And I think because of that, it has been an incredible stimulus for the church. And we know our work's not done. You know, we can never get to a place, because by the majority of Africans, there is still a lot of work to do from a health perspective, from an education perspective, from a development perspective. So we can never get to the place of saying, okay, we're done. You know, let's just relax.
Junius.
That is, I want to just kind of jump in here.
Yeah.
Because he said two things I want to kind of respond to. Number one, the concept of not having a church building. Right, because I think there's some truth to that. And I know as a church planter, early on in the church plant, I planted a church in California.
Absolutely.
I mean, after we had to be out, we were meeting in a middle school gym.
Yeah.
For the summer, they were going to be redoing the floor in the gym. we had to be out for the entire summer. We
Yeah.
ended up renting space
Yeah.
in a local Seventh-day Adventist church. So we were worshiping there on Sunday. It was a nice church,
Yeah.
right? Only problem was at the end of the summer, our people wanted to stay there because it was
Yeah.
a nice church.
you.
And I wouldn't let them do it
Yeah.
because I did not want to that spirit of movement,
Yeah.
right? I want to try to keep that alive for as long as possible. So I think there's definitely some truth to that. The second aspect of this, we talk about not being comfortable, right, in Africa. Now, I would argue that we have the same type of issues here in the United States, right? And so the church, the United Methodist Church in America, we don't have a reason to be comfortable. Unfortunately, too many of our churches are comfortable because we're not engaging those issues. So the same type of issues and the same type of the ways that communities are being impacted in so many negative ways across this country, there are lots of issues we could engage in, as churches in America. And so I think, that's one of those keys, right, to people releasing their gifts.
Yeah.
And that's one of the keys towards living out what it really means to transform communities, right? In that sequence, we're transforming lives, to transform communities, to ultimately transform the world.
Yeah.
And so we can't get stuck with the I. We have to make sure we continue to move and to invite transformation in our communities and ultimately the
Correct.
world.
The other thing about being comfortable is that we lose our audacity. So for example, in our church plant, we said, if you come, we would literally say it. We started off with 5 people on our very first Sunday. And it was actually 4. One of the ladies was pregnant, but we were counting everyone. It doesn't matter, man. We were like, man, there's a kid on the way. We're counting it exactly right, man. And so we had like 4.5, 5 people on the first. So we said, man, if you're worshiping here today, you have to work. Okay, you literally cannot come here and just sit down and leave again. So you either got to bring chairs, clean toilets, wash the floor, because we made sure that on Monday morning when that school came back to class again into their school hall, that it looked 10 times better than when they left on a Friday because they knew that the church was there. And so we cleaned the floors, cleaned the toilets. I scrubbed toilets for many years. So for example, if you had a child in children's church, you would never ever just drop off your child. If you were a parent, you were immediately rostered to either be a children's church, a class leader, or an assistant. Male, female, didn't matter. So you could never, and for 7 years we said to people, understand this, there's no free lunch. If you worship here, you work. Man, and it created this sense of, and we would do that, we would be, but now all of a sudden, now you got bills to pay, because now you got your own building, there's electricity and gas and all the rest of it, so now you got a bottom line number, you start employing staff, and stuff like that. Anyway, so that was the church is not audacious anymore. The church is not, I could just say, when's the last time, I say to pastors, when is the last time you took a risk? When is the last time you stood up in a congregational meeting and you shared a vision with your congregation that they held on to each other and went and like, oh my word, he or she is absolutely crazy if they think that this is going to be a possibility. But what happens is that we leave church meetings and then we're very comfortable because the pastor hasn't been too audacious, the pastor hasn't been too crazy. The pastor hasn't been, he or she they're comfortable. So we'll accept that and we'll move on.
The passion you brothers are bringing to this is fantastic. And I got to say, both of you have jumped ahead of the script a couple times. And that's all right.
It's actually him.
Good.
It's actually him.
I would like to say it's one of you, but both of you have done it. I'm proud of both of you. Thanks be to God, as revealed in Christ Jesus. Now, as you jumped ahead, you did start a church.
Yes.
You started a church in the United States of America. You just said, or not be comfortable.
Right.
That they've been in a place of buildings making them too comfortable.
Yes.
And as you well know, some of those people of African descent here are indeed and in fact persecuted.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Now, in that context, you are also leading a movement in the United Methodist Church from Discipleship Ministries called See All the People. In fact, you've got a hashtag, See All the People.
Yes.
What does this audaciousness Gary talked about and you affirmed, what does this moving out of comfort zones. What does that mean for community engagement now?
Well, so this is great because see all the people, really, one of the premises of this campaign is that discipleship begins with relationship. In other words, we can't disciple people that we're not in relationship with. And that moves beyond, again, that transactional type of thinking. Secondly, it's a way of transforming, right, missional engagement, right, or outreach, what we would traditionally think of as outreach. One of the things we do well in the church is outreach. I mean, we got mission projects down, right? We have the serving thing, we have it down. But what we don't do very well is the building of relationships. So that there are a lot of outreach or serving or mission projects that could really be transformed simply by saying, we not only want to just provide stuff for people or help for people, we really want to try to get to know who they are. We want to get to know their stories. And that is such, I mean, it sounds it's simple, but I promise you, this is like a huge paradigm shift. And I think that could be one of the most significant things we could do in terms of helping to transform relationships. And we are a lot of relationships across the church, but I can tell you, I've been to a lot of churches. I've coached hundreds of churches, thousands of pastors. I've been in a lot of places that will have they will have food pantries. They'll serve meals. But if you were to ask persons, do you know who that person is? Yeah. Do you know who that person is? They don't know these people.
What shuts down that kind of relationship and lack of authenticity, if I can say that, in terms of the relationships?
Well, I think the desire to help is authentic.
Okay.
I think the shift has to happen with that I'm not just in ministry for people, but I'm in ministry with people, right? So that's a fundamental shift. And the second is a fundamental shift in understanding that people really have the ability to empower themselves. People have the ability to create opportunities for their communities and to solve their problems. And I think when we don't allow persons in terms of it's a way of helping. You can help in such a way that you stop being helpful and instead you're being harmful. And I think that's a delicate balance, but I think just the way we approach relationships, right, is a way to say, I'm not here to be in ministry for you, I'm here to be in ministry with you, right? When we started Genesis in California, this new church started in California, the model that we used to start this church was a community organizing model, right? Community organizing model really was about building relationships. It was about connecting people who may not ordinarily have known each other or been in dialogue with each other. Secondly, bringing those persons together and giving them opportunities to dialogue and to be in discussion about about making progress on issues that they care about, right? And so that was kind of the model that we used to create this congregation. And if you think about that, it is fundamentally what we're saying is that there are persons in our community who are very capable. There are persons in our community who can contribute to things that are in terms of transforming a particular community. We have to create opportunities for those persons to be in relationship with each other.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, and one thing I love about the church is that there's no copyright. So I'm looking forward to the hashtags. You're the people in South Africa. I love it. No, but if you've been to South Africa, one of the things that we have to deal with is that at all our we call them. I'm just trying to think of what the American traffic lights.
Yes.
We call them robots. Don't ask me why. Anyway, at the traffic lights, you have people who are begging for money and asking for jobs, and so they have cardboards with I'm looking for a job or I need money. A lot of it came from some of the other African countries as refugees came into South Africa, and we would be looking for jobs. And so almost at every traffic light, for example in Joburg, there'll be at least one at each intersection where they're looking for a job or begging for money, and so what people have got to do now is that they arrive at the traffic light and without even looking at the person, they just sort of stare ahead, because they can't deal with this relationship thing here.
happens here.
And so I've said to people in Johannesburg, I've said to them, when you get to the traffic light, that person already feels that no one sees them. That person already, their dignity is impaired. They're struggling. With the whole. Now, when you pull up to the traffic light and you don't even honor them with just eye contact and see them, even if you've got no money to give them, and you just acknowledge their presence. Yes. Just shake your head. Just say hello. But what we do is that we can you imagine how much more damaging that is? So you already feel like you're nothing. You already feel invisible. Now, when people don't even acknowledge your presence in your desperate state, and I've said to them, so when you get to the traffic lights, see all the people, see them, because isn't that what Jesus did? So because we label people, don't we? And so the religious leaders label tax collector, adulterer, right. This, that, Pharisee, Sadducee. Jesus didn't. He saw a child in need. He saw a woman who needed to be shown grace. He saw a person who said, let's go to your house. And so he didn't label people. He saw all the people for who they were. And really, isn't that what it's about? Isn't Absolutely. That what when we're doing? We are saying, we refuse to have you just camouflage into the background. We see you for who you are, irrespective of your station in life, irrespective of your culture, your language. We see all the people. I love it. I think it's brilliant. I've got to be honest with you.
A person created in the image of God.
I'm taking it back.
And you know what? He just gave me some great illustrations for the next time I preach to see all the people.
Yeah. You don't even have to quote. You don't even have to quote me.
I heard.
It's free. It's free.
This sense of engagement then is actually seeing them.
Yes.
Not viewing.
Yeah.
It is seeing
Absolutely.
them.
Absolutely.
As touched of God. You're seeing the God in them in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
What a conversation this been.
Yeah.
What a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gentlemen, I invite you to give your last thoughts, if you would, on making disciples of Jesus. We want to see Methodism thrive.
Amen.
We want to see the Wesleyan movement thrive all across the world. Would you share some final comments? Gary, then Junius.
Okay. We have got the greatest story ever to tell, ever. I'm tired of people coming to me saying to me, Gary, you got to hear this movie or this vacation place and all this stuff. That's not good news. That's transient. We have got the best story ever, a story of hope, love, kindness, forgiveness, acceptance, and we must own that story. And I think that people are more ready to hear that story now more than ever before. It's a great story. It's about a kind and gentle and beautiful and accepting Savior, friend, that people need to hear about, more than we can ever know or imagine. And I wish and pray that we do away with all the religiosity, that we do away with all the stuff that has just caused us to trip and to stumble and to fall, and just take the purity of that beautiful gospel, that beautiful good news, that beautiful message, and share it with those around us, Yes. And I think that we will be found breathless at the response. We will literally have our breath taken away at the response of people once we share this beautiful, beautiful news that we have with them.
Yeah, and I believe that if the world ever needed to hear a message of hope, then it is for such a time as this.
Yeah.
And I believe in the power of the gospel to change lives. I believe in the power of the gospel to heal. I believe in the power of the gospel to give us a vision for something larger than ourselves, and a vision for those who are captive and those who are oppressed and those who are widowed. And that's the essence, right, of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as Gary said, we do have the best news in the world. We have the best news in town, and we should be sharing that news. And I think part of it is one of the keys, I believe, is this whole concept of identity, DNA, remembering who we are, right, in Christ Jesus. And when we're living out of that identity, then we can't help but share the good news. We can't help.
Correct.
But to say that we know a God who can heal your soul. We know a God who can help transform communities. We know a God who there's an answer, for the problems and the issues that we face in our world. And I think, that's the ultimate message. And my hope, my prayer is that we're able to continue to spur and inspire, to reawaken this movement of disciple making and the passion around disciple making. It's who we are.
Amen.
It's our DNA.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to get back to the basics.
Amen.
That's what I heard you say.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, this conversation has been inspirational,
Thank you.
informational, and I believe by God's grace it will be transformational.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop Gary Rivas. Thank you, General Secretary Junius Dotson.
Thank you so much.
God bless, God keep you.
Thank you.